Alright, so this is going to begin the section on learning for AP Psychology. Just a quick definition for learning, at least for the use for the AP test and all that. Learning is defined as a relatively permanent or stable change in behavior as the result of experience. There could be kind of slight variations in that definition, but for the most part, that's all you need to know. There's a lot of different kinds of learning, but the three main kinds that you're going to want to know and that I'll go into are classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and social learning. Alright, so classical conditioning is going to be the first type of learning to talk about. This was first described by a scientist named Pavlov, and basically what he did is he fed his dogs that he was experimenting on, and at the same time as he was feeding them, he rang a bell. And so that bell didn't really mean anything, it was just being rung at the same time that the dogs were being fed. But eventually, after a number of trials, the bell itself was just rung without the food being there, and the dogs were salivating. Now, normally, it obviously makes sense that the dogs were salivating just for the food because it's a natural reaction, but they were actually salivating for the bell that was originally paired with the food itself, even though obviously the sound of a bell is not appetizing, but they were classically conditioned to salivate for that bell, whether they realized it or not. So I'm going to give another example of this and use some of the actual vocabulary words like neutral stimulus and things like that with another example. Alright, so another example of classical conditioning I'm going to talk about is John Watson's Little Albert experiment. And so basically what John Watson did with his assistant was that he had a little test subject named Little Albert who was a child and was initially tested, and he wasn't afraid of any sort of small animal like a rat, for example, which is what was used in this experiment. And so what John Watson did was he gave the rat to the child, and at the same time he paired it with a large hammer smashing a piece of steel, so it was a really loud noise. And so naturally the child would be scared by this, and as you can probably guess, eventually, since they were paired together so much, the child was eventually afraid of the small white rat, even though he wasn't afraid of it in the first place. So basically the terms that you're going to need to know here are the conditioned stimulus. That's the white rat because he's going to be conditioned to be afraid of it, even though he wasn't initially. The unconditioned stimulus is the loud hammer. I guess the loud hammer is noise hitting the steel because that's a kind of natural human reaction to react to that. It's a loud, frightening noise, so you jump, you're afraid of it. The unconditioned response is the fright from the loud noise. That's your reaction to the unconditioned stimulus. So loud hammer noise is going to make you scared. And the conditioned response is your response to the white rat after the conditioning. So eventually little Albert was scared of the white rat, and that was his conditioned response after being conditioned to be afraid of it. So some other terms related to classical conditioning in the context of this study. Generalization, that's a big one that you'll want to know for the AP test at least. So that's like where little Albert, instead of just being afraid of the white rat, he'd be afraid of any white fluffy objects. He's generalizing with similar stimuli, and he's afraid of those too as a result of the classical conditioning. Discrimination, that's Albert's ability to distinguish among similar stimuli. So that, say, if Albert was still afraid of the rat but saw, say, some cotton balls or something, but was still able to tell that that was different. So he was discriminating from it and he wasn't afraid of that. Extinction, that's an elimination of the conditioned response. So that happens when the conditioned stimulus is no longer paired with the unconditioned stimulus. So say that the white rat wasn't paired with the loud banging hammer. Eventually, if the white rat kept being given to Albert without the banging hammer, then his conditioned response is going to go away. He's not going to be afraid of the rat after a while. Spontaneous recovery, however, is where that original conditioned response, the fear of the rat, reappears at a later date, even though it had been gone previously. So that just takes like one pairing of the white rat with the loud hammer, and boom, Albert is essentially scared of that rat again as a result with this spontaneous recovery. And basically the point of that is saying that even though the training may seem like it was done, it was gone, there's still a definite link within the brain associating the two.